I know his name's Richard, but I've no idea what he wants to ask, what he wants to say. Far away.
Are large corporations and government complicit in greenwashing? And is that obviously means that net zero doesn't mean anything?
Well, I mean, net zero, you know, Boris used to say, isn't it absolutely marvellous that we've reduced our carbon emissions by 44% since 1990? We've done it by deindustrialising. We've done it by closing down refineries, by closing down our steel industry, moving it to India and China, who then export the goods back to us. Global CO2 goes up, but we've played the big virtue game.
It's a nonsense and it's cost us.
It has cost us very, very dear. And I'll add one last thing, Richard, if I can, to that. Not just the damage to manufacturing that's happened and places like Stoke, you know, that actually have suffered directly from it, but also we should be energy independent. We have the gas and oil reserves in this country.
Just down the road.
We should be an energy exporter, and I think it's unforgivable what both parties have done on that question. And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
OK, Tony.
Good evening, Nigel.
Hi, Tony.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I think we're in big trouble, and for the foreseeable future. And I don't know about everyone else in the room, but I can only think of one person who can get us out of this trouble. Now,
well,
it's that bloke at the back there. A few weeks ago, Nigel, you were asked if you would consider getting back into politics.
Yeah.
And as I recall, your answer was yes, but you couldn't do it alone.
Yeah.
And you needed some big names to come over from the dark side to support you. And I just wondered whether there's been any indication of any of those big names making that journey.
Courage is a very rare commodity amongst our leaders. I'm not seeing a great deal of it yet, but I remain of the view that the Conservative Party have now become the problem and not the solution. They only went for Brexit very, very reluctantly because, frankly, they were kicked into it by people voting Brexit Party, voting UKIP and all the rest of it. I would like to think we can get a realignment of British politics where we get a party that is unashamedly patriotic and means it, believes in border controls, believes that actually mass legal immigration too has to be sensibly controlled, and that is on the side not just of the big corporates that we talked about a moment ago, but is on the side of men and women, 5.5 million of them, running their own business in this country, about to see their taxes go through the roof. There's been no regulatory benefit so far from leaving the European Union. So I want to see a realignment. Tony, I've not seen them yet, but for the minute, I will go on through GBNews and social media and elsewhere, providing alternative narratives. And I hope you feel this channel is doing that and contributing to the national debate. Thank you very much indeed. There's no clock. There isn't a clock. Clint, been removed.
Hi, Nigel.
Good evening.
I'd like to ask, why is it anyone who's patriotic and cares about the traditional values of this country labelled as far right instead of right by far?
Everyone's far right. The Italian elections are won by the far right. The French elections have got the far right. Israel has gone far right. And I think in the BBC's terminology, most of you in this room would be dangerous far right extremists. Yes. I remember years ago being called a crank and a gadfly, a fruitcake. Just ignore all this abuse. It's just utterly ridiculous. The truth of it is that the metropolitan big cities like London have gone so far towards the loopy liberal left that people with views that are just vaguely traditional, just vaguely patriotic, are now being demonised for doing it. Let me give you, though, Glenn, a piece of very, very good news. We are in the majority, not those in London who try and tell us what to think. All right. OK, Anne. Anne, good evening.
Good evening. After the fishing rights agreed in the post-Brexit trade deal, the French are still fishing in the UK side of the English Channel, which includes super trawlers that massively exceed their allowance. My question is, the UK are not allowed to fish in the French waters of the Channel So why is it perfectly okay for us to fish out
Yeah.
illegal immigrants from the French waters of the Channel?
Well, no, you're absolutely right, Anne. They get the fish, we get the migrants. You're absolutely right. There are actually, from what I can see of it now, more French and Dutch boats fishing literally on the 6 mile line off the south coast than there ever were before Brexit. We appear to be too cowardly to do anything about it. Look, you know, I did at the time point out that the fisheries cut of the Brexit deal was absolutely dreadful. The British fishing industry thus far has seen very little benefit from it. And you know what? As far as I'm concerned, this is unfinished business. If Norway and the Faroes and Iceland can have a 200-mile exclusive economic zone, we can have 200 miles or the median line round the UK. And I tell you what, Anne, one day we'll get it. Brexit was the beginning of getting back our rights and liberties. We may at the moment have politicians who are trying to reject that. We will, the silent majority, we will in the end get our way. I promise you.
Thank you.
And finally, Stephen.
Hi, Nigel. Is the modern-day political manifesto worth the paper it's written on? They tell us anything they want to when they're running for election, and then that's forgotten about.
I tell you what I'm going to do, Stephen. I'm going to ask that question to my next guest, Jonathan Gullis, MP. I'm going to ask him whether successive Conservative manifestos promising net migration would run at tens of thousands a year, and now we learn 4.2 million new people have come to Britain since David Cameron became Prime Minister. I'm going to ask him, was it worth the paper it was written on? As far as I'm concerned, and you can call me very cynical, they tell us what they think we want to hear at election time without ever wanting to deliver it. And frankly, we can criticise the Tories. I don't view Labour as being any better. That is the political crisis that we're in. We need a fresh approach, new parties, new leadership. Thank you.